Sometimes the darkest moments in our lives become the doorway to our greatest triumphs. Today's story is about a father who lost everything in one devastating afternoon. A 5-year-old girl who changed a billionaire's heart, and a single moment that proved miracles still happen in corporate America. This is a story about sacrifice, second chances, and the power of a father's unconditional love. Before we dive into this incredible journey, I want you to be part of our global community. Drop a comment below and let us know which city you're watching from. Are you joining us from New York, London, Tokyo, or perhaps a small town with a big heart? Your stories and support make this channel what it is, so please share where you're watching from, and let's see how far our story family reaches across the world. The fluorescent lights of Davidson and Associates hummed their usual monotonous tune as Marcus Thompson adjusted his tie for what he didn't know would be the last time in that building. It was 7:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that would change everything, and the weight of the world seemed to rest on his 34-year-old shoulders. Marcus had been arriving early for 3 years now, ever since the divorce papers were finalized, and he became the sole guardian of his 5-year-old daughter, Emma. The morning routine was sacred. Drop Emma at Little Stars daycare by 8:15, race through downtown traffic, and slide into his cubicle at Davidson and Associates by 8:45. As a mid-level accountant, punctuality wasn't just expected, it was survival. The divorce had been brutal, not just emotionally but financially. Sarah, his ex-wife, had moved to California with her new husband, a tech executive who could offer her the lifestyle Marcus never could. She'd agreed to give Marcus full custody, claiming her new life was too complicated for a 5-year-old. What she'd really meant was that Emma didn't fit into her Instagram-perfect existence. Marcus didn't fight her on it. Truth was, he couldn't imagine life without Emma's morning giggles, her bedtime stories, or the way she waited by the window every evening for him to come home from work. She was his anchor, his purpose, his entire world compressed into 4 feet of pure sunshine and endless questions. But being a single father in the corporate world was like walking a tightrope. Every single day. One sick day, one emergency, one deviation from the perfect employee profile, and everything could come crashing down. Marcus lived in constant fear of that moment, and this Tuesday morning everything fell apart. "Daddy, my tummy hurts," Emma whispered from her car seat as they pulled into the daycare parking lot. Her usual bright chatter had been replaced by an unusual quietness during breakfast, but Marcus had attributed it to sleepiness. Mrs. Rodriguez, the daycare director, met them at the door with concern etched across her weathered face. She'd been working with children for 30 years and had seen Marcus drop off Emma every morning for the past 2 years. She knew their story. The devoted father working 2 jobs to make ends meet. The little girl who never complained when pickup was late because Daddy had to work overtime. "Mr. Thompson, I'm afraid Emma has a fever. Our policy requires children to be fever-free for 24 hours before returning." "I'm so sorry, but I can't accept her today." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Emma's forehead was indeed warm to the touch, and her usually sparkling green eyes looked glassy and tired. Her cheeks were flushed with that telltale fever glow that every parent learns to recognize with dread. "How high is her temperature?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer would complicate his day beyond repair. 101.2 degrees. She's not dangerously ill, but she needs rest and monitoring. You know I'd bend the rules if I could, but with 23 other children. Marcus understood completely. Mrs. Rodriguez ran a tight ship, because she had to. One sick child could infect the entire daycare, leading to angry parents and potential lawsuits. She was protecting everyone, including Emma. His mind raced through options. His ex-wife, Sarah, lived 3 states away with her new husband and had made it clear that unexpected calls about Emma were disruptive to her new life. His parents had passed years ago in a car accident that still haunted his dreams. His sister lived in California and was dealing with her own family crisis. Her husband had just lost his job. There was literally no one. The neighborhood teenagers who sometimes babysat on weekends were all in school. Professional emergency, babysitting services in their area were either prohibitively expensive or required advance booking. Marcus had learned to live without a safety net. But he'd never been tested quite like this. "Daddy, I don't feel good," Emma murmured, leaning against his leg with the complete trust that only a child can have in their parent. The drive back toward downtown was silent except for Emma's occasional sniffles from the back seat. Marcus glanced at the clock on his dashboard. 8:52 a.m. He was already late, and calling in sick wasn't an option. The company was in the middle of quarter-end closing, and as one of only 3 senior accountants, his absence would be noticed and noted. Mr. Harrison, his direct supervisor, had made it crystal clear during Marcus's last performance review. "This job requires dedication, Thompson. Personal issues cannot interfere with professional responsibilities. We're running a business, not a daycare. I've seen too many employees use their children as excuses for subpar performance." Harrison was a man who wore his childlessness like a badge of honor. At 42, he'd never married, lived alone in a sterile downtown condo, and seemed to view parents with a mixture of pity and contempt. He often made comments about how breeding showed poor planning and life management skills. But looking at Emma in his rearview mirror, pale, trusting, and completely dependent on him, Marcus made the only choice a father could make. "Emma, sweetheart, Daddy has to go to work today, but you're going to come with me, okay? You can rest on the couch in the break room." Davidson and Associates occupied 3 floors of a sleek glass building in the financial district. The company had been founded 40 years ago by Robert Davidson, a man whose rags-to-riches story had become corporate legend. Starting with a single client and a borrowed desk, Davidson had built one of the most successful financial consulting firms on the East Coast. Marcus had never met the CEO personally. Employees at his level rarely interacted with C-suite executives, but everyone knew the Davidson story. More importantly, everyone knew that despite his billions, Davidson maintained a reputation for treating his employees fairly. The company offered competitive benefits, reasonable vacation policies, and a work culture that, at least in theory, valued work-life balance. Unfortunately, theory and practice didn't always align, especially in middle management, positions where supervisors like Harrison wielded their authority with little oversight. Marcus had never brought Emma to work before, but he'd noticed the comfortable leather couch in the employee break room during countless late-night shifts when he'd stayed to finish projects or help cover for absent colleagues. Surely just this once it would be okay. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt eternal. Emma, wrapped in her favorite purple blanket that Marcus always kept in his car for emergencies, held his hand with her small, feverish fingers. The blanket had been a gift from his mother before she died, soft lavender, fleece with silver stars that Emma had named her magic blanket because it made everything better. "Will your work friends like me, Daddy?" she asked in a voice barely above a whisper. "They're going to love you." "Princess," Marcus replied, hoping he sounded more confident than he felt. The office was already buzzing with activity when they arrived. Marcus's colleagues were decent people, mostly harried parents themselves who understood the impossible juggling act of modern working life. There was Janet, the senior clerk whose teenage son had special needs. Mike, the junior accountant whose wife traveled for work, leaving him to manage 3 kids under 10. And Susan, the department coordinator whose elderly mother had dementia. They all lived with the same underlying fear Marcus carried. That one family crisis, one moment of human need, could jeopardize everything they'd worked to build. Marcus guided Emma quickly through the maze of cubicles toward the break room, hoping to avoid attention. But hope, as he was about to learn, was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Thompson," the voice cut through, the office chatter like a blade. Mr. Harrison stood at his office doorway, his expression dark, even from across the room. "My office now." Several colleagues looked up from their computers, their faces showing a mixture of sympathy and relief that they weren't the target of Harrison's wrath. The office politics were clear to everyone. Harrison ruled through intimidation, and challenging him was career suicide. Marcus settled Emma on the break room couch, pulling her blanket up to her chin. The room smelled like stale coffee and microwaved lunches. But it was quiet and dimly lit, perfect for a sick child who needed rest. "I need to talk to my boss for just a few minutes, okay?" "You rest right here and I'll be right back." Emma nodded, already half asleep from her fever. "Okay, Daddy. Will you bring me some water when you come back?" "Of course, Princess." Sweet dreams. The walk to Harrison's office felt like a death march. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see his colleagues, pretending not to stare while obviously curious about the small figure on the break room couch. In an office where personal lives were expected to remain invisible, Emma's presence was as shocking as if Marcus had brought a live tiger to work. Harrison's office was a monument to corporate sterility. Generic, motivational posters, a desk devoid of personal items, and not a single photograph or memento that might suggest he had a life. Outside these walls, it was the office of a man who had fully embraced the myth that professional success required personal sacrifice. "Sit down, Thompson." Harrison closed the door with deliberate force, the click echoing like a gunshot. "Do you want to explain to me what that child is doing in my office?" "Sir, my daughter is sick and the daycare couldn't take her. I had no other options, and with the quarter-end closing—" "I don't care about your personal problems," Harrison interrupted, his voice rising. "This is a professional workplace, not a nursery. What's next? Are you going to bring your pet goldfish because it's lonely?" Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, but forced himself to remain calm. In his 3 years at the company, he'd built a reputation as steady, reliable and professional. His performance reviews had been consistently excellent. He'd never missed a deadline, and he often volunteered for overtime assignments that others avoided. "Mr. Harrison, this is an emergency situation. Emma is sick, she's quiet, she'll sleep in the break room all day. She won't disturb anyone, and I can complete all my work." "The answer is no, Thompson. Remove the child immediately, or face the consequences." Marcus tried a different approach, appealing to whatever humanity might exist beneath Harrison's corporate exterior. "Sir, please, I understand this isn't ideal, but I have nowhere else to take her. I'm a single father and—" "That's your problem, not the company's." Harrison leaned back in his chair with the smug satisfaction of someone who'd never had to choose between his paycheck and his child's well-being. "You chose to have a child, Thompson. That means you chose the responsibility that comes with it. You should have planned better." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Planned better? As if anyone could plan for a spouse who abandoned their family, for parents who died too young, for the 1,000 daily emergencies that came with raising a child alone. "You have 30 minutes to make arrangements. The child leaves or you both do." Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis. This job wasn't just his career. It was Emma's health insurance, their apartment, her future. His salary of $52,000 wasn't lavish, but it covered their basic needs and provided the stability Emma deserved. Without it, they'd be facing homelessness within months. But looking through the glass wall at his daughter, small, sick, and trusting him to protect her, he knew he couldn't abandon her. "Mr. Harrison, I'm asking you, as one human being to another. I'm not a father, Thompson, and I don't plan to be. Children are a choice, and choices have consequences. You chose to have a child. Now you're choosing between that child and your career. Make your decision." The next few hours passed in a blur of desperate phone calls and mounting dread. Marcus tried every option his frantic mind could conjure. Emergency babysitting services were booked solid or required advance registration. His neighbor wasn't home and didn't answer her phone. Even his ex-wife's sister, who lived 2 hours away, couldn't get there in time because she was at work and couldn't leave. Meanwhile, Emma slept fitfully on the break room couch, occasionally waking to ask for water or to be reassured that Daddy was still there. Each time she stirred, Marcus felt his heart break a little more. She was completely innocent in all this. Yet she might lose her stability because he couldn't find a solution to an impossible situation. During one of her wakeful moments, Emma looked around the break room with curious eyes. "Daddy, why is everyone so quiet when they come in here?" "They're working hard, sweetheart. This is a serious place where people do important jobs." "Like your job?" "Yes, like my job." Emma considered this solemnly. "Daddy, are you in trouble because I'm sick?" The question nearly broke him. How could he explain to a 5-year-old that the adult world was often cruel and inflexible, that showing compassion was sometimes seen as weakness, that loving her completely might cost them everything? "No, princess. You're never trouble. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." But even as he said the words, Marcus knew that their world was crumbling around them. Harrison's deadline was approaching, and he was no closer to a solution than he'd been 3 hours ago. As the morning wore on, Marcus became aware of the whispers around the office. Some colleagues expressed quiet sympathy when Harrison wasn't looking. Others shook their heads in disapproval, subscribing to the corporate mythology that good employees never let personal issues interfere with work. Janet, the senior clerk whose son had autism, stopped by the break room during her coffee break. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. If I could take her, I would, but I can't leave work either. Is there anything I can do?" "Thanks, Janet, I appreciate it. I don't know what I'm going to do." "Have you thought about calling the CEO's office? Mr. Davidson has a reputation for being fair, and he has grandchildren." Marcus shook his head. "I can't go over Harrison's head. That would be career suicide. And if I'm going to lose this job, I can't afford to burn bridges in the industry." But as the deadline approached and his options dwindled, Marcus began to wonder if burning bridges might be irrelevant if there were no bridges left to burn. At 11:30 a.m., Harrison emerged from his office with a satisfied expression and a security guard in tow. Marcus recognized the guard, a kind older man named George who always smiled and asked about Emma when Marcus worked late shifts. "Thompson, your time is up. Security will escort you and the child from the building." George looked uncomfortable with his assignment, but had no choice but to follow orders. The walk through the office toward the break room felt like a perp walk. Dozens of eyes followed their progression, some filled with pity, others with the morbid curiosity, reserved for watching someone else's life fall apart. Marcus's desk was a shrine to his dual identity as professional and father. Alongside the usual office supplies and financial reports were crayon drawings Emma had made for him, a coffee mug she'd given him for Father's Day that read "World's Best Daddy," and a small framed photo of the two of them at a local park, both grinning widely at the camera. As he packed his few personal items into a cardboard box, Marcus felt the finality of the moment settling over him like a shroud. 3 years of reliable service, of staying late when others went home, of never complaining about difficult assignments. None of it mattered in the face of one impossible morning. Emma woke as Marcus gathered her blanket and prepared to leave. "Are we going home, Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart, we're going home." But as they waited for the elevator with George, the security guard looking apologetically uncomfortable, Marcus realized they might not have a home for much longer. Without his job, they had maybe 2 months of savings, enough to cover rent and basic expenses, but not enough to survive a prolonged job search. The apartment search after the divorce had been brutal. Landlords were skeptical of single fathers, especially those without family wealth or perfect credit scores. Marcus had finally found their current place, a modest 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with good schools. But he'd had to pay first and last month's rent plus a security deposit that had wiped out his savings at the time. Starting over now, with a termination on his record and no references from his most recent employer, would be infinitely harder. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, and Marcus stepped inside, carrying Emma and the weight of their uncertain future. But as the doors began to close, a hand shot out to stop them. "Hold the elevator, please." The voice was unfamiliar, authoritative but not unkind. The doors reopened to reveal a tall man in an impeccably tailored navy suit. He looked to be in his mid-50s, with silver-gray hair and intelligent blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The man carried himself with the quiet confidence that comes from decades of success, but there was something approachable about his demeanor, a warmth that set him apart from the typical corporate executive. His suit was clearly expensive, but he wore it comfortably, without the pretension Marcus had observed in other wealthy clients who occasionally visited the office. "Going down?" the man asked, stepping into the elevator. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied quietly, shifting Emma's weight in his arms. The man pressed the button for the ground floor and glanced at Emma, who was now fully awake and studying this new person with the frank curiosity of a 5-year-old, even in her illness. Emma had never met a stranger, a trait that simultaneously delighted and terrified Marcus as he watched her navigate the world with fearless openness. "You're very pretty," Emma said suddenly, her fever-flushed face breaking into a small smile. "I like your sparkly watch." The man chuckled, a warm sound that filled the small elevator. His watch was indeed impressive, a vintage Rolex that probably cost more than Marcus made in 6 months, but he wore it without ostentation. "Why, thank you. That's very kind of you to say, and I think you're quite beautiful yourself. What's your name?" "Emma Thompson. I'm 5 years old and I'm sick today, so I can't go to school." "I'm sorry to hear you're not feeling well, Emma. Is this your daddy?" "Yes, he's the best daddy in the whole world. He takes care of me when I'm sick, and he reads me stories, and he makes the best pancakes on Saturday mornings." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes at his daughter's innocent praise, especially knowing that his ability to continue being the best daddy in the whole world had just been severely compromised. Saturday morning pancakes might become a luxury they couldn't afford. The man extended his hand to Marcus with the kind of firm handshake that spoke of decades in boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations. "I'm Robert Davidson. I don't believe we've met." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Robert Davidson wasn't just any name. He was the Robert Davidson, founder and CEO of Davidson and Associates, the billionaire whose company employed over 3,000 people across 12 buildings in the city. Davidson was a legend in the financial world, but more than that, he was known for his integrity and his commitment to his employees. The company's benefits package was among the best in the industry, and Davidson himself was famous for knowing the names of employees throughout the organization, not just the C-suite executives. "Mr. Davidson, sir, I'm Marcus Thompson. I worked in accounting on the 15th floor." Davidson's expression grew curious, his intelligent eyes taking in Marcus's cardboard box, Emma's blanket, and the uncomfortable presence of the security guard. "Worked past tense?" The elevator reached the ground floor, but Davidson made no move to exit. Instead, he pressed the button to hold the doors closed, creating a private moment in the midst of what had been Marcus's most public humiliation. Marcus felt Emma shift in his arms. Her small hand touched his cheek with the intuitive tenderness that children possess when they sense their parents' distress. "Daddy, why do you look sad?" The simple question, asked with such innocent concern, broke something inside Marcus. Here was his daughter, sick and vulnerable, worried about him even in her discomfort. And he'd failed her. He'd lost his job, their security, their future, all because he couldn't abandon her when she needed him most. "I'm okay, Princess," he whispered, but his voice cracked on the words. Davidson watched this interaction with an expression that was impossible to read, but Marcus noticed something shift in the older man's demeanor, a softening around the eyes that suggested recognition of something profound and familiar. "Mr. Thompson, would you mind if I asked what happened upstairs?" Marcus hesitated. What was the point in explaining? The decision had been made, the consequences set in motion. But something in Davidson's tone, patient, genuinely curious, devoid of judgment, made him answer honestly. "Emma is sick, sir. Her daycare couldn't take her, and I had no one else to watch her. I brought her to work, thinking she could sleep in the break room while I finished my assignments. Mr. Harrison gave me an ultimatum: remove Emma from the building or be terminated. I couldn't abandon my daughter." Davidson was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between Marcus and Emma with an intensity that made Marcus wonder what the CEO was thinking. When he spoke, his voice was measured, as if he were choosing each word carefully. "And Mr. Harrison terminated your employment?" "Yes, sir." Just now, Emma, who had been listening to the conversation with the seriousness that children sometimes display when they sense something important is happening, suddenly spoke up with the crystal clarity that cut through all the corporate complexity. "Mr. Robert, my daddy is really good at his job. He works really, really hard, and sometimes he has to stay late, but he always comes home to make me dinner. He's the best daddy and he takes good care of me." Davidson's expression softened in a way that transformed his entire face, revealing glimpses of the man beneath the corporate legend. "I can see that, Emma. Your daddy must love you very much." "He does, and I love him too. We're a team." "A team," Davidson repeated thoughtfully, as if the simple word contained layers of meaning that resonated with something deep in his own experience. He looked at Marcus with new intensity, the way a man might study a puzzle he was determined to solve. "Mr. Thompson, I'd like to invite you and Emma to my office for a few minutes. Would that be all right?" Marcus was so surprised. He almost dropped Emma. The CEO of a billion-dollar company wanted to meet with him after he'd just been terminated. It didn't make sense, but then again, nothing about this day had made sense. "Sir, Yes, of course. But Emma is sick, and my office has a private rest area with a comfortable couch. Emma can rest there while we talk." George, the security guard, looked confused but stepped back, clearly understanding that his escort duties had just been superseded by higher authority. The ride to the top floor was surreal. Marcus had worked in this building for 3 years but had never been above the 15th floor. The executive elevator was different from the employee elevators, quieter, smoother, with mahogany paneling instead of brushed steel. Emma was fascinated by the changing floor numbers. "Daddy, are we going to the top of the world?" "Almost, sweetheart. We're going to see Mr. Robert's office." "Does he live in the clouds?" Davidson laughed, a sound that seemed to come from genuine delight rather than polite courtesy. "Sometimes it feels like I do, Emma, but no. I live in a house just like other people." Davidson's office occupied the entire northeast corner of the 42nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. But what struck Marcus most was how lived-in the space felt. Unlike Harrison's sterile office, with its generic corporate art, Davidson's office was filled with personal touches that told the story of a full life. There were family photos scattered. Across his desk, pictures of children and grandchildren at various ages, vacation photos, candid shots that captured moments of pure joy. A bulletin board near his desk was covered with children's drawings, clearly treasured gifts from grandchildren. In one corner sat a small basketball hoop with a foam ball nearby, and Marcus could imagine the CEO taking breaks to shoot baskets while thinking through complex decisions. The seating area featured comfortable leather furniture that looked like it belonged in someone's home rather than a corporate office. There was a coffee table stacked with books, not just business publications, but novels, biographies, and what appeared to be children's books. "Emma, would you like to rest here while your daddy and I talk?" Davidson asked, gesturing to a particularly comfortable-looking couch. Emma nodded, and Marcus settled her with her purple blanket. The couch was perfect for a sick child, soft leather that was easy to clean, positioned where she could see both Marcus and the incredible view of the city below. Within minutes, she was asleep again, her breathing steady and peaceful. The medicine Marcus had given her earlier was finally taking effect, and she looked small and innocent against the expensive leather. Davidson walked to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. "Jennifer, please ask Mr. Harrison from the 15th floor to come to my office immediately. Also have someone from HR join us." He turned back to Marcus, who was standing awkwardly near the couch, unsure of what was happening or what was expected of him. The magnitude of the situation was beginning to sink in. He was in the CEO's office. His daughter was sleeping on furniture that probably cost more than his car, and somehow his termination had become a matter of executive attention. "Please sit down," Davidson said, indicating a chair across from his desk. "I'd like you to tell me exactly what happened today, from the beginning. Don't leave out any details." So Marcus told the story: Emma's fever, the daycare's policy, the impossible choice, Harrison's ultimatum, the termination. As he spoke, Davidson listened without interruption, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. The CEO's attention was complete and focused, as if Marcus's story was the most important business matter of the day. "And in your 3 years with the company, had you ever brought Emma to work before?" "Never, sir. This was truly an emergency situation." "I see. And your work performance, have you had any issues with quality, punctuality, meeting deadlines?" Marcus felt a glimmer of hope, but tried not to let it show. "No, sir. My last performance review was exceeds expectations in all categories. I've never missed a deadline, and I often stay late during busy periods. I really love this job, sir. This company has been good to me, and I've tried to be a valuable employee." Davidson nodded, making another note. "Tell me about your colleagues. How do they view you as a team member?" "I think they'd say I'm reliable. I help out when people are overwhelmed. I cover shifts when others have emergencies. Janet in our department has a special needs son, and I've covered for her during his medical appointments. Mike's wife travels for work, so I've helped him with last-minute schedule changes when his childcare falls through." "You help your colleagues with their family emergencies?" "Yes, sir. We all have families. We all face challenges. I believe in supporting each other." Davidson set down his pen and looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, what would you do if you were in my position right now?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He'd expected to defend his actions, perhaps plead for understanding, but he hadn't expected to be asked for his perspective on corporate leadership. "Sir, honestly, I'd want to understand why a good employee felt he had no choice but to bring his child to work. I'd want to know if this was a pattern of poor judgment or a one-time emergency. I'd look at the employee's history, his performance, his character, and I'd ask myself what kind of company I wanted to run, one that destroyed families when they faced crises, or one that found ways to support its people through difficult times." Before Davidson could respond, there was a knock on the office door. Harrison entered, followed by a woman Marcus didn't recognize from HR. Harrison looked confident, clearly prepared to defend his actions to his ultimate boss. But as soon as Harrison saw Marcus and Emma in the CEO's office, his expression changed. The confidence faltered, replaced by confusion and a growing sense that perhaps this meeting wasn't going to go as he'd expected. "Mr. Davidson, you wanted to see me?" Harrison's voice was steady, but Marcus noticed his eyes darting nervously between Davidson, Marcus, and the sleeping child on the couch. "Yes, Mr. Harrison, please sit down. I understand you terminated Mr. Thompson's employment today. I'd like you to walk me through your reasoning." Harrison straightened his shoulders, clearly prepared for this conversation. "Sir, Mr. Thompson violated company policy by bringing his child to the workplace. This is a professional environment, not a daycare facility. I gave him the opportunity to remove the child and find appropriate care, but he refused. I had no choice but to terminate his employment." "I see. And what specific company policy did Mr. Thompson violate?" Harrison opened his mouth confidently, then paused. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his features. "Well, sir, it's obvious that children don't belong in the workplace. It's disruptive and unprofessional." Davidson turned to the HR representative. "Susan, could you please clarify our official policy regarding family emergencies and children in the workplace?" Susan consulted a tablet, scrolling through what Marcus assumed was the employee handbook. After a moment, she looked up with a slightly confused expression. "Mr. Davidson, I'm not finding a specific policy that prohibits children from being in the office during emergency situations. Our general workplace policy mentions maintaining a professional environment, but there's nothing explicitly forbidding family members from brief visits or emergency situations." The silence that followed was deafening. Harrison's face had gone from confident to pale in a matter of seconds, and Marcus could see the man's Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. Davidson leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Harrison, in your 5 years as a department supervisor, how many times have you been faced with an employee bringing a child to work?" "This was the first time, sir." "And rather than consulting HR, reviewing company policy, or discussing the situation with your superiors, you chose to immediately terminate a 3-year employee with an excellent performance record." "Sir, Harrison began, but Davidson held up a hand for silence. Let me tell you what I see. Mr. Harrison, I see an employee faced with an impossible choice between caring for his sick child and meeting his work responsibilities. I see a father who chose to find a creative solution that allowed him to do both. I see a man who was willing to risk his job rather than abandon his daughter in her time of need. Davidson stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across his office, and for a moment, the only sound was the quiet hum of the air conditioning and Emma's peaceful breathing. Do you know what built this company, Mr. Harrison? It wasn't ruthless policies or heartless management. It was people, dedicated, hard-working people who understood that we're all human beings first, employees second. He turned back to face the room, his gaze settling on the sleeping Emma. I have 3 grandchildren, Mr. Harrison, 2 grandsons and a granddaughter. And if any of my employees faced the situation Mr. Thompson faced today, I would expect that their supervisor would show compassion, creativity, and leadership in finding a solution. Harrison was now visibly sweating, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. Sir, I was trying to maintain professional standards. You were trying to flex authority you don't actually have, over a situation that required wisdom, not power. Davidson's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the words. Tell me, Mr. Harrison, what did you hope to accomplish by terminating Mr. Thompson? I wanted to send a message that personal issues can't interfere with work. And what message do you think you actually sent? That this company values rigid adherence to imaginary rules over the well-being of our employees? That we punish people for being human? That fathers should abandon their children to prove their corporate loyalty? Each question landed like a physical blow, and Harrison seemed to shrink into his chair. Mr. Harrison, I've spent 40 years building this company, and I've learned something crucial. You can replace an employee, but you can't replace a father. Mr. Thompson didn't fail as an employee. Today he succeeded as a parent, and you failed to recognize the difference. Davidson returned to his desk and began writing on his legal pad. Susan, please prepare paperwork for Mr. Harrison's immediate termination. Severance will be standard package. The words hit the room like a thunderbolt. Harrison's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. Sir, you can't. This isn't. I have a mortgage, responsibilities. Then you should have considered those responsibilities before making decisions that could destroy another person's ability to meet theirs. Davidson's voice was final. Security will escort you to clean out your office. As Harrison was led away in a state of shock, Davidson returned his attention to Marcus, who was sitting in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. Mr. Thompson, I owe you an apology. The way you were treated today was completely unacceptable and does not represent the values of this company. Marcus found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. Sir, I don't understand what's happening. Davidson smiled, and it was the warmest expression Marcus had seen all day. What's happening is that you're getting your job back, along with a promotion to senior accounting supervisor, Harrison's former position. You'll receive a 40% salary increase, flexible work arrangements for family emergencies, and full family health benefits. The words didn't seem real. Marcus felt like he was dreaming, or perhaps hallucinating from the stress of the morning. A promotion? A 40% salary increase? It was too much, too good to be true. But, sir, I don't understand. Why would you? Let me tell you a story. Mr. Thompson, Davidson, walked over to his desk and picked up a framed photo of a young girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. 25 years ago, I was a single father raising my daughter Sarah after my wife passed away from cancer. I was working 80-hour weeks, trying to build this company from nothing, and Sarah spent more evenings in this office than most of my employees. He set the photo down gently, his fingers lingering on the frame with the tenderness of a man who understood that some memories are too precious to handle carelessly. I remember one night when she was about Emma's age. She got sick while I was in a crucial meeting with investors. My secretary, a wonderful woman named Mrs. Chen, found Sarah crying in the break room with a fever of 102. Mrs. Chen didn't ask permission, didn't consult policy. She simply cancelled my meetings, helped me get Sarah to the hospital, and told everyone that family came first always. Davidson's voice grew soft with memory, and Marcus could see the pain and gratitude still etched in the older man's features. After all these years, that night as I sat in the emergency room holding my daughter, watching her small hand disappear in mine, I made a promise. If I was ever successful, if I ever had the power to make decisions that affected other people's families, I would never forget what it felt like to be a parent, caught between impossible choices. He looked at Marcus directly, and in that moment, Marcus saw not the billionaire CEO, but the father who had once faced the same terrible dilemma. You made the right choice today, son. You put your daughter first, even when it cost you everything. That's not a character flaw. That's exactly the kind of integrity I want in my leadership team. At that moment, Emma stirred on the couch, sitting up and rubbing her eyes, with the confused disorientation of someone waking from fever sleep. "Daddy, are you still here?" "I'm right here, Princess," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion he was struggling to contain. Emma looked around the office, taking in the view, the photos, the comfortable furnishings. Her fever had broken while she slept, and though she still looked pale and tired, her eyes were clearer than they'd been all morning. "This is a really nice place, Mr. Robert. Do you live here?" Davidson laughed, the sound genuinely delighted. "Sometimes it feels like I do, Emma, but no. I live in a house with a big backyard and a swing set, just like you should have." "We live in an apartment," Emma said matter-of-factly, with the honesty that only children possess. "But Daddy says maybe someday we'll have a house with a yard where I can have a puppy." Davidson glanced at Marcus, who was looking overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "You know what, Emma? I have a feeling that someday might be sooner than you think." Over the following weeks, Marcus settled into his new role with a mixture of gratitude and determination. The transition wasn't without challenges. Stepping into Harrison's position meant inheriting the resentment of a few employees who had appreciated their former supervisor's rigid management style, but most of the department welcomed the change, particularly those who had families and understood the daily juggling act of modern working life. The salary increase meant Marcus could start looking at houses with yards, a petit dream that had seemed impossibly distant just weeks earlier. The flexible work policy meant he could be there for Emma when she needed him without fear of retribution or judgment. But more than the practical changes, something fundamental had shifted in Marcus's understanding of what was possible. He'd learned that sometimes, when you make the right choice for the right reasons, even when it seems like it will cost you everything, the universe has a way of rewarding that courage in ways you never imagined. Emma recovered from her fever within 2 days, and when she was well enough to return to daycare, she couldn't stop talking about Mr. Roberts' beautiful office with the flying windows, and how he was the nicest man who helped Daddy when people were being mean. Mrs. Rodriguez at the daycare was amazed by the transformation in Marcus's circumstances. "It's like something out of a fairy tale," she said as Marcus picked up Emma one evening. "Though I have to say you deserved a happy ending. I've watched you with Emma for 2 years, and I've never seen a more devoted father." Davidson made a point of stopping by Marcus's department weekly, always asking about Emma, and sometimes bringing small gifts, a coloring book, a stuffed animal. Once a framed photo of the city skyline taken from his office window, because Emma had said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. These visits became a source of wonder for the entire department. The billionaire CEO taking time from his impossibly busy schedule to check on a mid-level employee and his daughter. But to Davidson, these weren't charity visits or PR stunts. They were reminders of what really mattered, anchors to the humanity that success can sometimes erode. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after the incident, as the office had come to call it, Davidson found Marcus working late on a particularly complex audit. Most of the office had gone home, but Marcus was still at his desk, surrounded by spreadsheets and financial documents. "Working late again, Marcus?" Davidson asked, approaching the desk with concern. Marcus looked up, slightly startled. "Mr. Davidson?" "Yes, sir. Just finishing up the Garrison Industries audit. It's due tomorrow, and there are some discrepancies I want to resolve. And where's Emma? She's at her friend Sophie's house. Sophie's mom offered to keep her for dinner and let her sleep over, which is perfect timing with this deadline. Davidson nodded approvingly. This was exactly the kind of work-life balance he hoped to foster. Employees who could fulfill their professional responsibilities without sacrificing their family relationships, and who had the support systems necessary to handle both. Marcus, I want you to know that your work has been exceptional these past weeks. The department is running more smoothly than it has in years, and your team respects you. You're exactly the kind of leader this company needs. Marcus felt a flush of pride, but also a twinge of anxiety. Success still felt fragile to him, as if it might disappear as suddenly as it had arrived. Thank you, sir. I'm just trying to do right by the team and the company. You're doing more than that. You're showing everyone that it's possible to be both a dedicated professional and a devoted parent. That's a lesson some of us took too long to learn. There was something in Davidson's tone that made Marcus look up from his papers. Sir? Davidson walked to the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening darkness. I wasn't always the father I should have been, Marcus. When Sarah was young, I thought providing for her financially was the same as being present for her emotionally. I missed school plays, soccer games, parent-teacher conferences, all in the name of building something that would give her a better future. He turned back to Marcus, his expression filled with the kind of regret that only comes with years of reflection. It wasn't until she was older that I realized she didn't need a bigger trust fund. She needed her father. By then I'd missed so much. First steps, first words, first days of school. You can't buy those moments back. Marcus felt the weight of this revelation. Here was one of the most successful men in the country, admitting that his greatest regret wasn't a business failure or missed opportunity, but the time he'd lost with his daughter. Is that why you helped me, sir? Because you understood what I was facing? Partly, but mostly because I saw something in you that reminded me of who I wish I'd been at your age. You chose your daughter over your career without hesitation. That's not weakness, Marcus. That's wisdom I took decades to acquire. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone buzzing with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled. It's from Emma. She wanted to say good night. The message was simple. Good night, Daddy. I love you to the moon and back. Don't work too late. Davidson chuckled when Marcus showed him the message. Smart girl. She's got her priorities straight. She's everything to me, Marcus said simply. I know that probably sounds overly sentimental. It sounds like love, Davidson interrupted. There's nothing more important in this world than that. 3 months later, at the company's annual holiday party, Emma was undoubtedly the star of the show. Dressed in a red velvet dress that Marcus had saved weeks to buy, she charmed everyone from the janitors to the board members with her boundless enthusiasm and innocent observations about the grown-up world. The party was held in the building's top-floor conference room, transformed for the evening into an elegant ballroom with twinkling lights, festive decorations, and tables laden with food. It was Emma's first company party, and she approached it with the wonder of a child experiencing something magical. Daddy, everyone here is so fancy, she whispered loudly as they entered the room. It's like a princess party. Marcus laughed, adjusting his own tie nervously. Even with his new position and salary, events like this still felt surreal. But watching Emma's excitement reminded him to see the evening through her eyes, not as an obligation or networking opportunity, but as a celebration. Mr. Robert, Emma called out when she spotted Davidson across the room. She ran to him with the fearless confidence of a child who had never learned to doubt her welcome, her red dress streaming behind her like a cape. Emma, you look absolutely beautiful tonight. Are you having fun at Daddy's work party? Yes, and guess what? Daddy says we're going to look at a house next week, a real house with stairs and a backyard. The house hunting had been going well. With his increased salary and improved credit from steady employment, Marcus had been pre-approved for a mortgage that would allow them to buy a modest 3-bedroom home in a family-friendly neighborhood with good schools. It wasn't a mansion, but it would be theirs. Davidson knelt down to Emma's level, his expensive suit forgotten as he engaged with the little girl who had changed everything. That's wonderful news. And what's the first thing you want to do in your new backyard? Get a puppy! Daddy says maybe we can get a puppy if we have a fence. A puppy sounds like an excellent idea, Davidson agreed solemnly. Every little girl should have a puppy to play with. Do you have a puppy, Mr. Robert? I have 2 dogs, actually. Big golden retrievers named Max and Bella. They love to play fetch and swim in the lake behind my house. Emma's eyes widened with delight. Can I meet them someday? I think that could be arranged, Davidson said, glancing at Marcus with a warmth that spoke of genuine affection for both father and daughter. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself relaxing and actually enjoying the party. His colleagues were friendly and inclusive, treating Emma like a beloved mascot rather than an intrusion. Several people commented on how well-behaved she was, how articulate for her age, how lucky Marcus was to have such a wonderful daughter. Janet from the department approached with her teenage son, Michael, who had autism and was usually shy around strangers. But Emma, with her natural empathy and lack of judgment, immediately engaged him in conversation about his collection of toy trains. Michael knows everything about trains. Emma announced to anyone who would listen, he's teaching me about the different kinds. Did you know some trains can go 200 miles per hour? Watching his son light up as he shared his special interest with someone who was genuinely fascinated was a gift Janet hadn't expected. Thank you, she whispered to Marcus. Michael doesn't usually connect with people so easily. Emma has a gift for making everyone feel special, Marcus replied, watching his daughter and Michael pore over photos of locomotives on Michael's phone. As the evening wound down and employees began to leave with their families, Davidson pulled Marcus aside near the windows overlooking the city. I have something for you, he said, handing Marcus an envelope. Inside was a bonus check that made Marcus's eyes widen, more money than he'd ever seen on a single piece of paper. Along with it was a handwritten note that read, "For being the kind of father every child deserves and the kind of employee every company needs. Thank you for reminding me what really matters." R.D. Sir, I can't accept this. You've already done so much. Marcus, let me tell you something. In 40 years of business, I've learned that you can teach someone to read financial statements. You can train them on software. You can show them how to manage a team. But you can't teach character. You can't train integrity. And you certainly can't create the kind of love and dedication you show your daughter every single day. He placed a fatherly hand on Marcus's shoulder, the gesture both professional and deeply personal. That bonus isn't charity. It's recognition of value. The value of having employees who understand that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, is what builds real success. Davidson paused, looking out at the city lights twinkling below them. You know, Marcus, I've been thinking about expanding our family assistance programs, flexible scheduling, emergency childcare, parental support groups. Would you be interested in heading up that initiative? Marcus felt his heart skip. You want me to create family support programs for the company? Who better than someone who's lived the challenges our working parents face? Someone who understands that supporting families isn't just good human relations, it's good business. The opportunity was beyond anything Marcus had imagined possible. Not just a job, but a chance to make a difference in the lives of other parents facing the same impossible choices he'd once faced. I'd be honored, sir. Truly honored. Good. We'll start planning after the new year. For now, go enjoy your evening with that beautiful daughter of yours. As Marcus drove home that night with Emma asleep in her car seat, still clutching the balloon Davidson had gotten her from the party, he thought about the morning, 8 months ago when he'd carried her out of this same building, certain that their world was ending. How wrong he'd been. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives are actually doorways to the best chapters of our story. Sometimes losing everything teaches us what we can't afford to lose. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe rewards a father's love with more than he ever dared to hope for. The house they looked at the following week was perfect. A 1950s ranch with hardwood floors, an updated kitchen, and most importantly, a fenced backyard where a little girl could play safely. Emma fell in love with it immediately, running from room to room and declaring each one perfect for our new life. The golden retriever. Puppy came from a local rescue organization 2 weeks after they moved in. Emma named him Charlie, and he quickly became her constant companion and protector. Marcus would often find them, napped together in the afternoon, sunshine streaming through the living room windows, Emma's small arm thrown protectively over the sleeping puppy. The family assistance program launched 6 months later to tremendous success. Marcus had worked with HR to develop policies that supported working parents without compromising business needs. Flexible scheduling, emergency backup childcare, lactation support for new mothers, and most importantly, a cultural shift that recognized employees as whole human beings rather than just productivity units. The program became a model for other companies in the industry, and Marcus found himself speaking at conferences and consulting with organizations across the country. But the moment that meant the most came during the program's first annual review meeting. Davidson stood before the assembled department heads, presenting statistics that showed decreased turnover, increased productivity, and improved employee satisfaction since the program's implementation. The success of our family assistance initiative proves something I've believed for decades, Davidson said, his voice carrying the authority of experience. When we support our employees' families, we don't weaken our business, we strengthen it. When we recognize that our people have lives and responsibilities outside these walls, we don't become less professional, we become more human. He gestured to Marcus, who was sitting in the conference room feeling somewhat overwhelmed by the praise. This program exists because one father had the courage to put his child's needs first, even when it seemed like it would cost him everything. That courage reminded me of what this company should stand for. Excellence in business, built on a foundation of human decency. After the meeting, as Marcus was packing up his notes and preparing to leave, Davidson approached him with an expression of quiet satisfaction. Marcus, I want you to know that the board has approved your promotion to Vice President of Human Resources. The announcement will be made next week. The words hit Marcus like a physical force. Vice President? It was a title he'd never even dreamed of aspiring to. A level of corporate leadership that seemed impossibly beyond his reach just 2 years earlier. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say you'll continue to be the kind of leader who remembers that behind every employee, ID number is a human being with hopes, fears, and families. Say you'll help me build the kind of company where no parent ever has to choose between their child's needs and their career. I promise, Marcus said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. That evening, as he shared the news with Emma over dinner in their sunny kitchen, she listened with the serious attention she gave to all important matters. Does this mean you're like Mr. Robert now? She asked, considering the implications of her father's promotion. Not quite like Mr. Robert, but it means Daddy gets to help make the company a better place for other mommies and daddies who work there. Emma nodded thoughtfully, twirling spaghetti around her fork with the concentration of a master craftsman. That's good. Daddy, everyone should be able to take care of their kids when they're sick. The simple wisdom of her statement struck Marcus profoundly. Out of the mouths of babes came the fundamental truth that had transformed his life. That caring for our children isn't a weakness or a distraction from our professional responsibilities. It's the most important work any of us will ever do. 2 years later, at Emma's 7th birthday party in their backyard, Marcus stood watching his daughter play with a dozen friends from her new school. The yard was filled with laughter, the sound of children playing, and the kind of joy that only comes from feeling truly secure and loved. Davidson was there, along with his wife, Margaret, and their grandchildren, who had become Emma's close friends. The billionaire CEO was manning the barbecue grill with the enthusiasm of any suburban dad, wearing an apron that read "World's Best Grandpa" and engaging in serious discussions with the children about the proper cooking time for hamburgers. You know, Davidson said to Marcus as they watched Emma attempt to teach Charlie the golden retriever to jump through a hula hoop, I've been thinking about retirement. The comment surprised Marcus. Sir, you're not even 60 yet. Exactly. I don't want to make the same mistake twice. I missed too much of Sarah's childhood building this company. I don't want to miss my grandchildren's childhoods maintaining it. Davidson flipped a burger with the skill of someone who had clearly been practicing his domestic skills. I've been grooming you for broader responsibilities, Marcus. The board has been impressed with your leadership, and I think you're ready for greater challenges. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that in 2 years, when Emma is settled in school and you're ready for the next chapter, I'd like you to consider stepping into the role of Chief Operating Officer, eventually perhaps even CEO. The suggestion was so unexpected that Marcus nearly dropped his beer. Sir, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of responsibility. Marcus, do you remember what you told me that day in the elevator? When I asked what you would do if you were in my position? Marcus nodded, remembering the moment that had changed everything. You said you'd want to understand why a good employee felt he had no choice but to bring his child to work. You said you'd look at the employee's history, performance, and character. You said you'd ask yourself what kind of company you wanted to run, one that destroyed families in crisis, or one that supported its people through difficult times. Davidson set down his spatula and looked directly at Marcus. That, my friend, is exactly the kind of thinking that makes great leaders, not the ability to crunch numbers or manage quarterly reports. The wisdom to understand that business success built on human suffering is no success at all. As the party continued around them, Marcus felt the weight and possibility of Davidson's words. The scared, desperate father who had carried his sick daughter into that elevator 2 years ago could never have imagined this moment standing in his own backyard, discussing the future leadership of a billion-dollar company, while his healthy, happy daughter played with friends in the sunshine. But perhaps that scared father had always carried within him the seeds of the leader he was becoming. Perhaps the qualities that made him a devoted parent: patience, sacrifice, the ability to see beyond immediate obstacles to long-term goals, were exactly the qualities the business world needed more of. I'll consider it, Marcus said finally, but I have one condition. Name it. The company continues to prioritize family support. We continue to remember that our employees are parents first, professionals second. We never again put anyone in the position I was in that day. Davidson smiled, extending his hand for a firm shake. Deal. As the sun set on Emma's birthday party, as the last guest departed and Charlie the dog collapsed in exhausted contentment after a day of being thoroughly spoiled by children, Marcus tucked Emma into bed in her room in their house with its white picket fence and backyard swing set. Daddy, Emma said as he pulled her favorite purple blanket up to her chin, I'm glad you got fired that day. The comment surprised him. You are? Why? Because if you didn't get fired, we wouldn't have this house, and Charlie and all our friends, and Mr. Robert wouldn't be like our family now. Her 7-year-old logic was flawless, and Marcus marveled at her ability to see the hidden blessings in what had seemed like disaster. You're right, Princess. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us turn out to be the best things, like when I got sick that day. Exactly like when you got sick that day. Emma yawned, her eyelids growing heavy. Daddy, will you always take care of me even if it's hard? Always, Emma, no matter what. That's what daddies do, and I'll always love you, even when you have to work late sometimes. I know you will, sweetheart. Sweet dreams. As Marcus turned off the light and closed Emma's bedroom door, he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 3 years ago, he'd been a divorced single father living paycheck to paycheck, terrified that one emergency could destroy the fragile stability he'd built for his daughter. Now he was a homeowner, a company vice president, and quite possibly the future leader of one of the most successful firms in the industry. But more importantly, he was still the same father who would choose his daughter's needs over his career advancement every single time. The difference was that now he worked for a company that understood that this wasn't a character flaw, it was a character strength. In his study that evening, as Marcus reviewed proposals for expanding the family, assistance program to other Davidson and associates locations nationwide, he came across a letter that had arrived that day from a single mother in the Chicago office. "Dear Mr. Thompson," it read, "I wanted to thank you for creating the emergency childcare program. Last week, when my babysitter called in sick and I had no one to watch my 3-year-old son during an important client presentation, I was terrified I would have to choose between my job and my child, the same impossible choice so many parents face. Instead, the company's emergency childcare service allowed me to give my presentation while knowing my son was safe and well cared for. I got the promotion I'd been working toward for 2 years, and I didn't have to sacrifice my responsibilities as a mother to achieve it. Programs like this don't just help individual families, they change entire lives. Thank you for understanding that parents can be both dedicated employees and devoted caregivers." The letter was signed gratefully, Michelle Santos, Senior Account Manager. Marcus smiled as he filed the letter with dozens of others like it, testimonials from parents whose lives had been changed by policies that recognized their humanity. Each letter represented a family that wouldn't have to face the choice he'd once faced, a parent who wouldn't have to choose between financial security and their child's well-being. As he prepared for bed that night, Marcus checked on Emma one more time, as he had every night for 7 years. She was sleeping peacefully, Charlie curled up on the rug beside her bed, both of them safe and secure in the life they'd built together. Standing in the doorway of his daughter's room, Marcus thought about the scared, desperate man who had carried a sick little girl into an elevator 3 years ago. Certain his world was ending, that man couldn't have imagined the blessings that would grow from that moment of crisis. Sometimes the universe rewards a father's love with miracles beyond imagination. Sometimes choosing to do the right thing, even when it seems like it will cost you everything, opens doors you never knew existed. And sometimes, the most important business decision you'll ever make is the decision to never forget that behind every employee is a human being with real struggles, real fears, and real love for their families. Marcus had learned that success isn't measured only in salary, figures, or corporate titles. True success is measured in the ability to sleep peacefully at night, knowing that you've stayed true to your values, even when it was difficult. It's measured in the trust of a child who knows, without question, that her father will always choose her well-being over everything else. It's measured in letters from grateful parents whose lives are easier because someone remembered what it felt like to be caught between impossible choices. As Marcus finally headed to bed, he thought about Davidson's retirement plans and the possibility of leading the company into the future. It was a responsibility he didn't take lightly, but he faced it with confidence born of experience. He knew what kind of leader he wanted to be, the kind who understood that the strength of a company lies not in its policies or procedures, but in its people, the kind who remembered that every employee has a story, a family, a life that extends far beyond office walls, the kind of leader who would never forget the lesson Emma had taught him that day in the elevator, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply remind people that behind every professional facade is a human being worthy of compassion, understanding, and support. In the end, Marcus learned that he hadn't lost his job, that day 3 years ago he'd found his calling. And Emma learned that the world, while not always fair, still contains enough good people to make miracles possible for those brave enough to believe in them. The last thing Marcus did before turning out the lights was to place a call to his assistant, asking her to schedule a meeting with the board about expanding the family assistance program to include emergency pet care services. He'd received several requests from employees who struggled to balance work responsibilities with caring for sick pets, yet another impossible choice that no one should have to make. Because Marcus Thompson, soon to be COO of Davidson and Associates, understood something that not all leaders grasp, that building a successful business isn't about demanding that employees leave their humanity at the office door. It's about creating an environment where people can bring their whole selves to work, their dedication and their compassion, their professional skills and their personal values, their commitment to excellence and their love for their families. It's about understanding that when you support people's capacity to care for what matters most to them, you don't weaken their professional performance, you strengthen it immeasurably. And sometimes, when you get that balance right, you don't just change individual lives. You change the entire culture of what it means to be a leader in the modern world. This story reminds us that in a world that often seems dominated by corporate coldness and rigid policies, there are still leaders who understand that behind every employee is a human, being with real struggles, real fears, and real love for their families, sometimes doing the right thing, even when it seems like it will cost us. Everything opens doors we never knew existed. And sometimes the most important work any of us can do is simply creating environments where people can be both successful professionals and devoted family members without having to choose between the two. The true measure of leadership isn't found in quarterly reports or stock prices, but in the lives we touch and the humanity we preserve in our pursuit of success. Marcus Thompson's journey from desperate single father to corporate executive proves that the qualities that make us good parents, sacrifice, integrity, putting others' needs before our own, are exactly the qualities the business world needs more of. In the end, Emma was right. Sometimes getting fired is the best thing that can happen to us because it forces us to discover who we really are and what we're truly capable of becoming.